Hello. Thank you all for coming this morning. My name is Rob Russell, and I am the coroner in Kane County. We are here today to bring closure to an incident that originated in 1978. This case started many years before it was made known to us and is an example of great teamwork. With me today are some of those team members.
Hello.
Next to me, I have Deputy Coroner Gabriella Allison. She is the lead investigator in this cold case. Next to Gabby is Michael Vogan. He is from Othram Incorporated in the Woodlands, Texas. Chief Mazza from the Batavia Police Department. Next to Chief Mazza is Kane County Chair Corrine Parag. And next to Corrine is Batavia Mayor Jeff Schelke. Also in attendance today, we have Kane County Board Member Leslie Juby over here. On November 12th, 1978, a citizen, James Skinner of Batavia, was renovating his residence at 239 East Wilson in Batavia. Upon knocking down a wall of the residence, Mr. Skinner discovered what appeared to be a human skull between the studs of the wall. Mr. Skinner immediately called the Batavia Police Department and an investigation was started. At that time, DNA and genealogical records were not as advanced as they are today, so options were limited. Batavia Police did an incredibly thorough investigation with what they had available at that time. Several outlets were contacted to include national labs, museums, as well as colleges and universities. The most that could be obtained at that time was from a university professor who surmised that the skull was from a young woman around age 20. It was also determined that the skull was from someone prior to 1900. Batavia Police searched records for missing persons and no additional information was revealed. After the exhaustive search and investigation, the case grew cold. On March 10th, 2021, employees of the Batavia Depot Museum were cleaning and making room at the museum when a box containing a skull was found. Not knowing where the skull originated, museum employees called the Batavia Police to report the finding. Batavia PD performed a search of their records and found the original 1978 report. No additional evidence was recovered from the search. The Batavia Police Department then decided to appropriately remand the skull to the Kane County Coroner's Office for continuation of the investigation. The next day, we continued the investigation, and because the case was minimally over 40 years old, I decided that the cold case team was best suited to investigate this incident. Deputy Gabriella Allison was assigned as the lead investigator. I started the cold case investigative team in July of 2015 to review old cases in response to citizens who had legitimate questions and concerns in relation to previous equivocal death rulings. Upon reviewing existing evidence and chasing down leads for 2 years, we became aware of a company called Othram Laboratory in Texas. This company performed a relatively new investigative technique called Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy, or we'll call it FIG, F-I-G-G for short. This is the same procedure that was used to catch the Golden State Killer in 2018. By the time we had heard of them, Othram had already solved over 100 cases across the country using this process. Our hope was that if FIG could solve these cases, then maybe a profile could be established for ours. Although our case was much older, we placed our hope in Othram's process. Othram graciously offered to look at the skull to determine if they could obtain any DNA from the skull, even though it was so old. After several weeks, Othram informed us that they were able to obtain some usable DNA that they could test, and if they were able to obtain a profile, it could be run through their database where members of a family with similar ID could be discovered. Othram said that if we would like to do this procedure, the funding required could be obtained through a crowdfunding site as a means of obtaining the required fees needed. I felt that the public would be interested in helping in the solution, so the crowdfunding option appealed to me. So in December of 2023, a press release was sent out about the unknown identity of the 1978 found skull with an appeal to the public for their help. With the help of the media, many of you who are here today, and the generous individual citizens who answered that call, we were quickly able to gain the funds necessary to perform the ancestral match with the DNA from the skull. Within 2 weeks of me officially authorizing the testing and genetic matching of the skull, Othram sent a report to us stating that the profile had yielded a match. Not only did they have a match, but also a family tree with living relatives. Othram asked that we make contact with the assumed family lineage members for confirmation. We reached out to the second great-grandson of the person in question, and he submitted DNA to Othram to confirm a DNA family match. The grandson's DNA was confirmed as a match. We now know the skull found in the wall in Batavia as Esther Granger. Esther was born on October 26, 1848, in Indiana. In 1865, at 16 years old, she married Charles Granger, and after a few months became pregnant with their first child. In May of 1866, Esther gave birth to a baby girl, but lost her life soon after due to complications from childbirth. She was buried in Maryville, Indiana, leaving behind a husband to care for their newborn daughter. In honor of his deceased wife, Charles named the baby girl Esther, the same name as her mother. So the question remains, if she died in 1866 in Indiana, how did she end up in a wall of a house in Batavia? We will never definitely know exactly, but with records and good reasoning, we've come to a common sense theory. We believe Esther was a victim of grave robbing. Grave robbing was quite common in that era, as it was quite profitable. The grave robbers made the equivalent of 3 to 4 months' earnings for an average person working 60 hours a week. One body every few months would give a grave robber a reasonable living, which is why it was so attractive at that time. It was also dangerous. Although it was illegal, many law enforcement agencies did not enforce it. Justice was relegated to vigilantes, many of whom were family members of the deceased. Many riots occurred in response to known grave robbing incidents across the country, and several perpetrators of the crime were murdered. One such riot occurred here in Kane County in the city of St. Charles in 1849 in an incident called Richard's Riot, which is a separate. Esther was not part of that riot. Again, there is no absolute answer to how Esther ended up in that wall or where the rest of her body is located, but being a victim of grave robbing does fit the bill. Since discovering Esther's identity, we were able to make contact with Esther's second great-grandson, Wayne Sfiler. Wayne has been a great asset in helping us to determine Esther's identity. We are very honored to be able to serve his family by restoring a sense of decency to the life and death of his second great-grandmother. With the approval from her family, Esther Granger was laid to rest in Batavia at West Batavia Cemetery in a columbarium space donated very kindly by the city of Batavia. Wayne Sfiler gave an appropriate eulogy to his grandmother he never physically knew, however, stated he felt he knew Esther because he had such a great relationship with his own mother and grandparents. He knew Esther through them. The positive identification and probable theory of how Esther's remains were found in a house in Batavia was surmised through an intense investigative process. We are detectives sworn to uphold and investigate the truth behind those who pass on from this world. Although the entire office and our partners work together to conclude this investigation, I would like to specifically thank the following people and agencies. Special thanks to Deputy Gabriella Allison. She's been the hands and feet of this investigation. She spent not only hours, weeks, and months, but years at performing this investigation. I'd like to special thanks to the Batavia Police Department. They have been step in step with us the entire process. We just really appreciate what they've done. The City of Batavia and Mayor Schelke, thank you. Thank you for stepping up and giving Esther a final resting place. The Batavia Depot Museum, thank you. Thank you for doing the right thing and calling the police and helping us to solve this crime, this incident, not crime. Othram Laboratories, without them, we would be nowhere. Mr. Wayne Sviler, who I believe is online, is that correct? Yes, he could not make it. He lives in Portland, Oregon, so he was able to make it through Zoom, and we will have him on and have him available for questions for those that are interested. Thomas Doggett from Thomas Doggett Photography, he took the forensic photos of the skull. And 3D Resin Solutions of South Elgin. They 3D printed the replica of that skull, which is right here. This is not the actual skull. This is the 3D printed replica of the actual skull. Because again, the actual skull has been entombed. Forensic artist Natalie Murray, who was able to take the skull, I don't know if you can get that other, yeah, that one, and actually give us a picture of what Esther may have looked like. Is that not cool or what? Very cool, very excellent. I'd also like to thank my chief, Lauren Carrera, my assistant chief, Rebecca Nielsen, and the entire staff. They've all been great. We've all done our part as a good team does. Lastly, but not least, I want to thank all the citizens who donated resources and said prayers for a successful outcome. Understand that your gifts were put to great use and your prayers were answered. Thank you. I'd like to bring up Michael Vogan from Othram to explain some of the process, because I'm sure you have questions on that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Vogan. I'm the Director of Account Management with Othram. I'll give just a kind of a cliff notes of who we are. We built Othram. We're actually the first private laboratory in North America that was built exclusively to generate human ID from forensic evidence, be it unidentified human remains, like in this case, or even suspect DNA. We built a complete end-to-end forensic process completely in-house that looks at hundreds of thousands of markers of DNA. Using these markers of DNA, we build these high-performing profiles that can then be used to upload into databases and connect families. And that's what we did in this case. And so I want to thank all these folks for trusting us to assist, and we're happy with the outcome.
There are also some other people I'd like to thank. We have Allison Namila, is that right? Namela from the Batavia Depot Museum, and Katie Burgess from the Batavia Park District Batavia Depot Museum. Craig Tinrella, he's the owner of 3D Resin Solutions, who printed this excellent representation of the actual skull. And of course, I can't leave out Maureen Kelly. She's the other half of my cold case team. We've got a few other cases we're working on, and we'll continue to work on those, but she's also my FOIA officer, so that's important for you guys. So that's all that I have for today, and I'm open to any questions you all might have.
Mr. Russell, hi, Terry, WBBM Radio. You know how old the house was where the skull was found in 1978? Was that an older home?
It was. It was an older home. I don't know the exact, 1850 is when it was built. Yes.
Okay, so it's possible the skull was brought there. We don't know.
Yes.
The skull could have put in other places, but could have been there for decades and decades.
Our running theory is that the skull was, there was probably somebody who was studying medicine that needed a cadaver or pieces of a cadaver or a skull or whatever to do whatever study that they needed to do, and then at some point knew the ramifications of having said item and probably put it in the wall. That's my running theory.
I was going to say, that was another question I had. Did grave robbers back then, they would steal, I imagine, jewelry or even clothing and things like that, shoes, maybe whatever, but also that would happen for medical, for seemingly more rational purposes,
yeah.
Or suitable.
Well, it was very profitable. Like I said in the release, it's, it was 3 to 4 months of salary back then. What would you rather do? I guess if you're a person, you want to be in the fields for 3 to 4 months, working 60 hours a week, or grab which I understand, but still wrong, very wrong. But that's why they did it.
So to follow up on that, who are these grave robbers selling the cadavers to? And
Back then, it was medical schools
Okay.
that would purchase them because they needed something to study. They had really nothing.
Even though it was illegal, medical schools were doing it.
Yes.
Do we have something from the grandson, the relative, that you would like to say?
Yes. Is Wayne on?
Yeah, ask them to turn their cameras on and.
Oh, there he is. Hey, Wayne.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
How did your family accept this news, and what did you make of it?
So that's a great part of the story because Gabriella called us back in April, and so we took the phone call, and the only number she had was for our hardline phone, and we get very few phone calls on that phone line, and the majority of them are scam calls. So to be completely honest, we didn't believe a word of it, not a one. My wife took the first call, and she called me at work and said, I just got the weirdest call. And my first response was, her name's Margaret. I said, Marge, what have you told them so far? So that was the start. And I called Gabriella back, and it took a while. I told her right off the bat, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe you. And you can keep talking if you want, but I don't believe a word you're saying. And this same pattern took 2 or 3 phone calls to convince me. Now, I need to tell you a little bit of my background to kind of verify that or give some support to that. Because I'm a retired police sergeant and 28 years with Portland Police Bureau. And my responsibility back in 2004 was to be part of a team that started up the cold case squad for the city of Portland. We had over 300 cases that we started with. So when Marge got this call, first thing she told Gabriella was, well, you must know what my husband did before, and this is probably part of one of his cases. So this journey kept going, and I ended up talking to Gabriella. In this process, I talked to Rob, and I also talked to Michael on the phone. And I'll be honest with you, what convinced me that this was not some well-organized scam was their passion for their work and just the commitment they had to what they were doing. And that's been every step of the way. The respect that they've shown us, my family, in this process has been incredible. So that's how it all started.
Can he hear me?
I think so. Can you hear him?
Yes.
How does it feel now? Is it a sense of completion, of joy? Or there must be some sadness in this as
Yeah.
well, please.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, I can tell you when I came back for the burial, and I told Gabriella this, I said, it's going to sound weird, but I told her, it feels like I've been here before, and I've never been to Batavia before. So this whole process has been, a little bit different. I spent the night of the burial at, what's the name of the hotel? Gabriella, you're going to have to help us.
Baker.
So I spent the night there, and I was standing outside of the hotel the night before the burial, and there was a lady there who was taking pictures, and I said, isn't that a nice place? And she said, yeah, I got married here. And she looked at me and said, you know it's haunted, right? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. So there's been just these circumstances and irony to it, but you're right, there is this sense of closure.
exact relation? I'm sorry, you're the great-great?
Great-great-grandson. And my first name is spelled W-A-Y-N-E, and the last name is S-V, like Sam, Victor, I-L-A-R.
How's that pronounced? I'm sorry.
And pronounce it?
Yes, please.
Depends on who's saying it. It's a Yugoslavian name, and if you're back there, it's Svilar. When Grandpa came over, he changed the pronunciation, the English pronunciation is Sweller. But even my sons pronounce it different, so it depends on who's saying it.
We'll call you Wayne.
As well as your corner says it different.
You did fine, Rob.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Does anyone in your family look like this picture?
You know, another good question. I was just comparing, I was talking to or texting with Gabriella yesterday, and I sent her a picture of my mom, and there are some similarities. Another side note to this is, you know, I've been retired for a while, and so during this process, talking to Gabriella and Michael and coming out there and seeing I just recently took a job with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. Part of my responsibilities will be working cold cases.
Wow. Can you share your age?
What? No, this is going to be part of it. I'm 69 years old.
Young looking 69.
Could you restate again what office you're doing cold cases for? There was a hitch in the giddy up there.
The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office in Portland.
Any other questions for any of our distinguished people here?
Yes. I don't want to dominate the.
No, go ahead.
Question for you, and if you could go to the
Sure.
microphone, just. If you can talk about the difficulties and the technology that has become so advanced that allowed you to do this.
Yeah, so.
Can you speak closer to the mic,
Sure,
please?
is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, so the advances in technology, you know, historically, the technology's been used for these very old cold cases, kind of like this. What we're finding is that there's DNA virtually in all cases, suspect or unidentified remains. What we fine-tuned at Othram is basically having a process that eliminates any contamination, degradation, mixtures we can often work through. So there's very little crime scene DNA that we can't work with these days. We don't need a lot of it. Historically, there were labs that wanted like 20 nanograms. I know these terms don't mean anything, but that's a good amount of a small amount of DNA. Now we're working for like 100 picograms, so the technology is advancing very quickly.
Can you talk about the cost?
Yeah, I think on this case, we raised about $7,500, and that includes all the lab work, extracting DNA, building the profile, uploading the DNA, and then genealogy.
Is this one of the oldest cases that you've dealt with?
Glad you asked. This is the oldest.
This is the oldest?
Yeah, previously we had one from 1881, so this is now the record holder, yeah. And hi Wayne, I didn't know you'd be on. Good to hear you again.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a nanogram or a picogram is.
It's a measurement of DNA, concentration of DNA, very small amount.
Comparable to what?
100 picograms is like 15 human cells. So I touch my,
What?
if I touch my jacket, I'm leaving about 100 cells of DNA. So 15 of that would be 100 picograms.
Oh,
Not a lot. And in this case, of course, the remains were very old, so we had to do some human enrichment and things like that, but we got what we needed.
Forgive me here, but are there any unrealistic expectations with, TV and movies? It seems like they can solve these things so quickly now.
Yeah, I think the quickness in which they do it is unrealistic. It takes time, and you got to be careful with DNA. You only get one shot sometimes on suspect DNA, so you want to make sure you do it the right way.
can you talk a little bit about why this was important to you and why you continue to pursue it?
I don't like undone things, and to me, this was an undone thing, and we had the means to do it. So why not do it? There was really no reason not to. You know, if you know anything about my tenure here, I mean, I've helped to bury over 300 people that were that were forgotten. To me, life is very valuable, no matter what your life was like or what issues you had in your life. Everybody's here, and we, as humans, we only have two universal things that we share. Number one, we're all born. Number two, we all die. So I think the people put me here to honor that, the latter side of the equation, to do it to the best of my ability. And my ability is only as good as the team that I build. And by building a good team, I think we're able to do a lot. I mean, this seems extraordinary, but what you're talking about is ordinary people that are just doing a little extra. And I think that we're called to do that. I've never been a person that can just sit and collect a check, you know, and I'm not pointing any fingers or anything at anybody. I'm just saying that if I'm here to do something, I want to do it and do it to the best of my ability. That's just who I am.
I'm curious in terms of the connection to Batavia, because obviously it was found in Batavia, but you really don't know beyond that, right? I mean, there's not like a police investigation you can perform, is there?
This case was really unique from the standpoint of, you're talking about going back to look at records that are 45 plus years old, and police work is different now. The way we document things, technology is different, than it was 45 years ago. So trying to just go back in the records to find stuff to provide the coroner's office, was difficult, and it was a challenge. We've had some building moves since then, and I think in this case, from our standpoint, there's a lot of questions that are difficult, if not impossible, to answer.
How did the skull end up at the Depot Museum?
Another question that we don't have an answer to. We took the case originally in 1978. It would appear from records that it showed up in the inventory in 1979 at the Depot Museum. But how it got there, I don't know. We don't have any records in the department as far as it being transferred, outside of our building.
Did you speak to any officers from 78? Or are you still?
So we did. One of our our detective sergeant spoke with several investigators who would have been on this case back in 1978, and none of them had a recollection of it as to why or how the skull would have made it to the Depot Museum.
The important thing is everybody did what they're supposed to do, and it made it to the office because some people inside the museum said, hey, this is something we shouldn't have, and they did the right thing.
Well, my name is Jeff Schulte. I have the honor of being the mayor of Batavia, and I've also had the opportunity in one of my previous adventures in life as I co-authored the history book of Batavia. And so I have some background, and when this all started, I got brought in for some questions about did we know anything about, we didn't know a name or anything about this. This house where this was found is really right smack dab in the oldest part of Batavia. And we had a judge come to Batavia from upstate New York in 1833, or 32 I guess it was. He came in and his name was Judge Isaac Wilson. And he was kind of vain enough that one of the things he did when he got there was he named the main street in town after himself. So we still have Wilson Street as the main street that goes across Batavia. Judge Wilson claimed to have been from Batavia, New York, and so he decided he would name Batavia, Illinois after the town he had moved from in upstate New York. Well, come to find out, a couple of years ago, I was visited by the historian from Batavia, New York, and he wanted to know about Judge Wilson because they didn't have any records of the guy. He wasn't anybody, he was kind of a mystery man. And they ended up tracing them out to another town in their county, which were kind of south of Niagara Falls here a little bit, called Mayville. And I went to Mayville after it was found, and it's still a town of 13 houses and a Baptist church, and that's all that's there. But the Wilsons were they kind of came and went, and Judge Wilson, they were gonna put a railroad track through Batavia, so he built his house right on the railroad track. It's still there today. It's the oldest house in Batavia, at Prairie and Wilson, and it's where the railroad would come by and they would throw the mail out the door, and so that way he could be paid for being the postmaster. And so there was maybe 10 houses, and he got some fee for doing that. He ended up having enough money that he acquired all this vacant rural land on the east side of Batavia, and if you go to the old deeds, you will see his name as the one who owned the land originally. And so we don't really have any reason why. We don't know where this woman came from. We don't have any names of anybody in town that was knew her or had any relation to her. She's kind of a mystery to us, but I commend the coroner for what he's done here in trying to bring this together, because this was kind of an interesting question where the skull came out of the closet. The last two people that lived there, one was a doctor and he had his office in there, and the immediate thing was, well, maybe he had done something. He was there way after this skull was obviously put there. And then the last one was an attorney who had his law office in there, and he and his wife lived upstairs. So it's been kind of a house that's been there for a long time. Ironically, I just was at another thing this week where we were talking about, there's a school on the end of the block, or an old school called Louise White. It's now an office building, but it's right behind where this house was. And in 1893, that school burned to the ground. And so that there was a rebuild of that. So there's been a lot of activity. And then the Catholic Church is literally right across the street from this place. So there's always been all this activity around this house, and nobody ever knew till this skull appeared that we had this adventure going in Batavia. But I really appreciate the efforts that have been made here to kind of bring this together, and certainly I commend the coroner for really holding on to it and getting us to where we are today. So thank you for helping us solve a mystery that we didn't have a murder that we didn't know about or whatever.
If I might, could bring up Chairman Kareem Parag, just to say a few words.
Thank you. What a story. I mean, oh my gosh, what an incredible historical moment for all of us. I just wanted to come up and thank the coroner's office. And the coroner's always been known to step out of just direction and go the long distance to really help Kane County residents in a time of great need, and value people, whether they're alive or not, deceased, but to really respect their life. And this is really, holy cow. This is a holy cow, what a fascinating bit of history. And to commend the History Museum for finding it and actually taking care of it, even though you didn't know it was there in plain sight, but giving it to the police department, who again took the time and effort to search the records, and then eventually giving it to the coroner's office, who went the extra mile, and the public for helping to find and fund the legacy of this extraordinary woman who died in childbirth, or the effects of childbirth, probably at around 17 years old. So how sad, I mean, how sad. And the legacy that her family now has to know her past, who she was, what she looked like, and allow her children and her grandchildren to grow and to thrive, which obviously, as we saw, they have. So again, thank you to the coroner, and thank you to all of the wonderful employees we have here in Kane County, and to our board, who continues to steward their work and to make sure that we serve the needs of Kane County. So thank you.
Do we have any more questions of anyone here?
Yeah, does Wayne live in Portland, or he just works in Portland?
I think he actually lives in Washington, isn't that correct, Wayne? I think he's still on. Yeah, he lives in Washington, but it's right over the border, right?
Yep, just across the border from Portland.
And would the man from Altham please spell your name?
Sure, it's Michael, Michael, and last name Vogan, V as in Victor, Ogen,
And your title is?
Director of Account Management.
I'd also like to point out that we have a media press kit for everyone to take back to your newsrooms so that all of the numbers and emails and everything, if you have follow-up questions, is available to you.